They said, we got a girl coming in a few days. We're going to put you together because Maggie, you can't write a melody, but you're one of the strongest lyrics writer that's ever been in Nashville. So they said, she's got a song in the charts. And I said, oh, what's the song? And they said, Honky Tonk Girl. And I said, well, that's Loretta Lynn.
Up and down Broadway, across the avenues, East Nashville to West End, Belmead and Bellevue, Midtown, Franklin, Green Hills, Redwood, Donaldson, and Hendersonville. The people, the places, the lifestyle, living, loving in the 615.
Welcome to the Pod 615 with your host, William Kitchens. In celebration of Women's History Month, William sat down with the Poet Laureate of Tennessee, Margaret Britton Vaughn. Maggie, as she prefers to be called, has served in this role since 1995. Prior to being elected to the position, her career has been quite eclectic. More than just a critically acclaimed poet, Miss Vaughn is a published playwright and Grammy-nominated songwriter. She holds a degree in theater from Middle Tennessee State University and was the first creative writer recipient of the Mark Twain Fellowship from Elmira College. In our special two-part episode, Maggie discusses her career, her love for the arts and country music, and especially for the artists and members of the Grand Ole Opry during the historic Ryman Auditorium years.
Let her go. Let her go, boys.
Let her go. Why didn't you write that song? You should have written that, Maggie. Yeah. We're here today with Maggie Vaughn and her wonderful companion, Keats, the ginger cat. He's here hanging out somewhere with us, getting some sun today. Maggie, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good for an old woman who's crippled.
Who said you were old and crippled?
Yeah. Well, I broke my ankle in 3 or 4 places last year. And I was in rehab for a while, and I hated it, and I left. And I'm in a wheelchair if I go anywhere. And I have a walker in the house. Scared I'll fall, that's, again. And so I'm very careful. I stay home a lot now. I used to travel all over the United States speaking, but I got old.
What's the most interesting place you ever got to speak?
Oh, Lord. That's hard to say. So many places. I was in Buffalo, New York a lot. A little community right outside that had a college there. And they brought me in all the time to speak there. The teachers would bring me in. And I was there so much that the kids thought I was on the faculty. And I loved it. And what's so funny is, my English teachers in high school were saying, you'll never be a writer because you can't spell. And I ended up teaching classes in college. Showed them, but they're all dead now, I think. Might be one still living.
Maggie, when did you realize you were a poet?
Well, I knew I was going to be a writer when I was 5 years old. And when I was in the 3rd grade, I wanted to write songs, country music. Country music helped give me my voice because of the way they phrase things. And I wrote it, and I went to Mama with a sheet of paper with my song on it. And I said, Mama, I want to be a songwriter and a poet. Here's my first song. And of course, it was titled, Here I Sit Alone at the Bar. Mama looked down and said, are you sure you don't want to be a nurse? I said, no, Mama, I want to be a poet and a songwriter. And I kept that dream, and it came true.
It sure did. And then in 2004, you got nominated for a Grammy for a song you wrote with Loretta Lynn.
Loretta Lynn. Yeah. But, I wrote for Loretta for years. She's done a lot of my songs. And I would just pitch it in there. She had a box that she kept her stuff in, her songs, and she forgot I wrote it. I doubt that sometimes I didn't even put my name on it because she knew how sloppy my handwriting was. It was bad as hers. And she just forgot I wrote it and left me off. And I heard she was being interviewed by Mike Wallace. And he said, well, you're going to be performing your Grammy nominated song, because it was way up in the charts. It was on an album, and she and Jack White did together. And he said, titled, I Miss Being Mrs. Tonight. And I thought, Lord, I wrote that. And I called the office, and Loretta came in. She said, Lord, Maggie, I forgot all about it. I'll get your name on it immediately. But by then, it had been out a pretty good while. And I missed out on some royalties. But you know what? Money's not that important. Friends are more important. Money can't buy friends. If they do, they're false. And Loretta is a true friend. And I didn't get on her or anything. I mean, I love that woman. And we're very close. And I wouldn't take anything for our friendship.
Tell me how you two met.
Well, I came to Nashville in 1960. I couldn't pass biology in college. I'd gone 4 years plus a summer trying to pass it. And when I couldn't pass it, I just left. Got disgusted, came to Nashville to write. And the Wilburn brothers, Teddy and Doyle Wilburn, had a publishing company. And, of course, they were on the Opry and real big. And they said, we're going to sign you to write for us. And they said, we got a girl coming in a few days. We're going to put you together because you, Maggie, you can't write a melody, but you're one of the strongest lyrics writer that's ever been in Nashville. So they said, she's got a song in the charts. And I said, oh, what's the song? And they said, Honky Tonk Girl. And I said, well, that's Loretta Lynn. And that Saturday night, I was backstage. I used to be backstage at the Opry with all of them every Saturday night. And she must have said, which one's Maggie? And someone said, over there. And she came up, she says, I'm Loretta Lynn. We're supposed to write together. And I said, I know it, and I can't wait. And that night started a friendship that's been unbelievable all these years. I spoke at her daughter's funeral. I was there when those kids were just babies. Even the ones that are grown and older now. And, of course, when the twins, they were born after Loretta and I've been friends a long time.
Sure.
So I've spent the night at Hurricane Mills there in the big old 2-story historical house. And I wouldn't take anything for the friendship. Money can't buy friendship. And money's never meant that much to me. I mean, I have to have it to get by. And I sell art and stuff like that I've collected through the years that helps me, or a piece of furniture. I've got furniture that belonged to some pretty famous people. And I've never thought about money. We grew up poor. My daddy was a fireman and killed on duty in 1939. I was born in 38. I was like 6 or 7 months old when he died. And Mama remarried a couple of years later, an older man. And he was a physical therapist at the VA in Murfreesboro, but he was from like Pennsylvania somewhere. And my brother was born after my daddy died. Mama was pregnant when he was killed. And he was transferred from Murfreesboro to Gulfport, Mississippi. And I'll have to say that's probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me on the transfer. Because in Murfreesboro, when I was born in 1938, a girl was supposed to finish high school, get married, and have babies in that order. And that was it. And I knew then I was going to be a writer. I knew when I was 5 years old I was going to be a writer. So when we got to Gulfport, it was wide open, honey. Gambling, strippers, girls were supposed to go to college, just liberal thinking. And I had the best of both worlds, the conservative world and the liberal world. And so what you do is you pick and choose from both of them to make your life. And I did. I've got some conservative ideas and I got some liberal ideas. And I wouldn't take anything for them. And if you're going to be a good writer, you got to open your mind up and heart to everything. my family were pretty much agrarians, farmers. Mama, we came down through the Crockett line. I'm kin to David Crockett. He was raised by his uncle, which was Anthony Crockett. He was a famous colonel in the Revolutionary War. And that's the line I came down through. And Mama used to say we were from blue blood. And I said, well, Mama, it pinked up a little by the time it got to you, and you were working at the nickel magnesia plant in Gulfport. And that would make her mad. But you know what?
Obviously had a wonderful relationship with your mother.
I did. Mama had a hard time. And she and my stepfather divorced when my brother I was around 12, and my brother was around 11. And she worked then 7 days a week to put food on the table. And she worked at a woman's store, so clothing. She also worked for a pecan company. She ran the gift shop for Washington Pecan Company. And we became very, very close to Mr. Washington, who was a widower. And
now, was that in Mississippi?
Mississippi. That was in Gulfport. And, you know, but times were hard. And we didn't have the fancy clothes, and we didn't eat fancy food, but we had a good life. And Mama did without so we could have. And Mama was a little squirrely at times. Mama, honey, every morning she was saying, I'm dying. She used to say it, no matter whatever disease was on TV that day, Mama had it. I'll never forget one day, I was sitting in the living room with her, and she said, did you hear that? I said, what, Mama? She said, my ovary just blew out. Well, I mean, that was Mama, you know. Mama was a card, but did without and worked all the time, and worked a half a day on Sunday at a bakery because the gift shop would be closed on Sunday. And that afternoon, as soon as she'd take her nap for the week, my brother and I would go to the jail and talk to the prisoners. We loved talking to the prisoners. We'd stand outside the bars there. We were just little kids. And we went to a Saturday matinee on, you know, in the movies back then. It was Roy Rogers and Gene Autry and Hopalong Cassidy. And, you know, they'd say to the crooks would say to the men in jail in the movies, say, we're going to spring you. And so Bubba and I thought, well, we'll spring those prisoners. And we took a big rope and tied it to the bars and tied it to a train. And that train started up, and that rope broke and came back and nearly cut our heads off. It didn't hit us, or it would have. And the jailer knew we were out there every Sunday afternoon. And he finally came out and said, all right, you Vones, get inside the jail. You're safer in there than you are out here. So we had a good life. We had a fun life.
We'll be right back to the Pod 615 after this quick message from our sponsor.
Just a short drive from Nashville, in the heart of Middle Tennessee, lies the historic town of Bell Buckle. And there, nestled in amongst the charming antique and boutique stores that line the main street, sits the famous Bell Buckle Cafe. For over 30 years, this family-owned restaurant has served their delicious, freshly made menu items to locals and visitors from everywhere. Not only the best meat and three in Tennessee, the menu also includes barbecue, catfish, chicken tenders, pork chops, burgers, sandwiches, and salads. And after 4 p.m., the popular J. Gregory's Pizza, originally from Huntsville, Alabama, is deliciously prepared and sliced up. Whether a day trip down from Nashville or simply driving through the state, Bell Buckle and the Bell Buckle Cafe is a must. Find the Bell Buckle Cafe on Facebook or check out the website at bellbucklecafe.com.
So now you moved back,
I
come
moved
home
back.
to Murfreesboro,
Okay.
right?
I
And what
moved-
year was this and
I
how
was,
old?
in 1960, I came back for 1 year. That's when I signed to do the country music. And at the time, I had maybe a couple of recordings, but nothing big. And so I went back home because I didn't have the money to live over a year, and started work for the newspaper. Let me tell you, if there's some young girls out there listening, go for it. I walked into that newspaper, and I said, I understand you have an opening for someone to sell outside advertising to the stores for the newspaper. And this man said, I would love to have you, but I can't. No woman's ever been an outside salesperson in Mississippi. I'd be the laughingstock of the convention. And I said, well, what if I'm good at it? And he said, well, I never thought of that. I'm going to get you on a 6-month trial. Well, in 6 weeks, I'd outsold every man in there. And he said, you're hired. Then I would come home every year on vacation to Tennessee and see my relatives. And I stopped by the Tennessean and Banner. They had a department there in the building with them called newspaper printing. That's where all the salespeople were. And I said, I looked up the manager of advertising, and I said, you know, I'd love to come back to Tennessee. It's home. And if you ever have an opening. And he took all my information, and I guess he checked me out, because about 3 months later, he called me to come to work there. And it was summertime, and a lot of the men were on vacation and at Gulfport. And I said, I can't, people are on vacation, I can't leave the paper. And he said, well, let me talk to the advertising man over him. And he said, no one's ever been hired without meeting him. They wanted me to come meet him. And he said, I'll get back with you. Well, a day later, he called, and he said, I told him, he said, you tell her to come on. If she's that dedicated, we want her. So that's when I started working for the Banner and Tennessean's advertising department, which was Newspaper Printing Corporation. And John Siegenthaler was publisher there then. He was passed away, but he's real big name all over the nation as a publisher, and he had his own show, Word on Words, on PBS and all that. So, as a matter of fact, he published my first book. I have a story on that if you want to hear it. Minnie Pearl was like another mother to me. And where my mother was very conservative and wanted me to stay in my job, and have a career there and have Social Security and all of that. I wanted to move to Bell Buckle. Bell Buckle is about an hour from Nashville. It's an art and craft community with writers and artists, all kinds of artists. And it called to me through the years. I believe in signs, and I'll tell you about that. When I was in about 5 years old, I came to Bell Buckle with my Aunt Martha, who was coming over to buy material. Today it's all art and craft stores down there, but back then there were stores that sold merchandise. And I was fascinated by the name Bell Buckle. Didn't care anything about the material or anything, but Bell Buckle just stayed with me through the years. In the late 50s and early 60s, Jimmy Dean had a show, TV show. And he'd say, today's special guest was Molly B from Bell Buckle, Tennessee. And I thought, oh, there's that Bell Buckle. And I loved country music. And Molly was on his show a lot. Then later, when I moved back here in 1965 permanently, I was working there for the Tennessean and Banner. And I took a night class because I couldn't pass that biology in college. And I thought, I'm going to get a degree from somewhere. And I got up during a break and walked to the back to hall there to get some water. And I passed this young man. I guess he was 20, 21. And he said, hello, Puddin'. And I just stopped in my tracks. And I said, my daddy called me that. I said, he died when I was 9 months old. I even have a Valentine to Puddin'. And I said, that's what my daddy called me. And I said, what's your name? And he said, Winfred. And I just froze. I said, that was my daddy's name. Now, Winfred's not a popular name, like John and Harry and Bill. And we became dear friends. And One day he called. We used to go. He called me because we'd go junking, what we call junking on the weekends with friends. Old antique shops and places that they sold junk and all that. And he said, "Let's go to Bell Buckle. There's an art and craft show going there." And I thought, "There's that Bell Buckle again." We drove in. Half the buildings were falling in downtown. Some of them were there, but most of them were in pretty bad repair. And I looked at him and I said, "Winfred, this is where I'm supposed to be in life. It's called to me all these years." And I went back and quit my job and gave him a couple of weeks' notice and moved to Bell Buckle.
What year was this?
This was in 1982. And my mother didn't speak to me for 2 months because I'd given up everything that she'd hoped I'd have to move to what she called a one-horse town. And Minnie Pearl was like a mother to me, and Minnie knew all about it and said, "Go for it, Maggie. You can do it. You go for it."
Tell me how you met Minnie Pearl.
I met Minnie Pearl in 1960 when I was in Nashville. And I went to a publishing company. And they said, "Well, Maggie, we've got staff writers already here that write songs." And they said, "Is there anything else we can do for you?" And I said, "I would love to meet Minnie Pearl." And he picked the phone up and called her. And she said, "You have her meet me backstage Saturday night. I'll be there." And I met her. And we became the closest of friends. She was like another mother to me. Where my mama was saying, "Don't go to Bell Buckle," she was saying, "Go for it, Maggie. There's artists there and everything. You'll fit right in." And we remained close all those years. And she asked me to write a poem about Grinder Switch, and I did. And it's in my Grand Ole Opry book. As a matter of fact, she helped me get the book published. She took it out to the Grand Ole Opry. And they called me and said, "We want to do your book." And I thought, oh my goodness. They said, "Minnie brought it in. We love it." So I met them the next day. I went out there. And they said, "Yep." They said, "A lot of stuff comes our way, but never like this." And so I went back, and John Siegenthaler, who was publisher then, heard about it. And he said, "I want to see it." I said, "Well, okay." And I said, "The Opry's going to do it, And he looked at it, and he came back the next day and said, "The Tennessean wants to publish it." And I thought, oh my goodness, you go all these years, and now 2 people want your book. So I called the Opry, and I said, "Gosh, John Siegenthaler wants to publish it for the Tennessean." And of course, everybody knew John. And they said, "Maggie, let him do it." Said, we were going to do it in October for the convention, and something may come up, because this was like early summer, and we not be able to do it. And they said, "Let him do it, and we'll buy a bunch of them." And I said, okay. So John published it. And there's another story there. I've lived my life about you only get back what you give away. And one time I was in Moon Drugstore eating lunch. That's out on West End when I was there at the newspaper. And I was in line to pay my bill, and there was a young man in front of me, and he had the saddest look on his face you've ever seen. And I said, "Son, are you okay?" And he said, "Oh, ma'am," he said, "I saved my money for years." He was from a small town somewhere near, I'm a bus drive from here. And he said, "I got here to go to the disc jockey convention, and it's closed out." And I looked at him, and I reached in my pocket, and I said, "Here's my tickets. I've been every year. You take my tickets, and you have a good time. And my badge." I said, "Just pretend you're me." I said, "They don't look at the badge anyway." And he said, "I can't do that." I said, "Please." I said, "I've been so many times. I would love for you to go in my place." Well, after my book came out for the Tennessean, somebody who was handling it came to me and said, "Ernest Tubb Record Shop wants a bunch of them." They said, "Since you know all of them down there, Ernest, you may want to take them down there? And I said, yeah, give them to me and I'll go. Because they had boxes of them. I walked in, and the assistant manager was the young man I gave my tickets to years and years before. He now owns the place. But see, you never know in life. You know, I gave my tickets away. It came back. And that's happened to me all through the years.
The Pod 615 will return in just a moment.
Are you looking for a new way to promote your business, product, or service? If yes, then why not consider advertising here on Pod 615? Use your own ad, or we'll create a custom one to showcase your brand right here. Reach out to us online at pod615.com. That's pod and the numbers 615, and learn how we can help promote your business, product, or service.
You've written so much great stuff.
Okay.
You've written so many poems about your mother. You recorded a CD called Southern Voice.
Southern Voice in every direction.
Yeah, you recorded it. It's nicely done. It's got music in the background. It's well produced. And then you narrate these poems, and included one called "Is That You, Mama?"
Well, let me tell you how that came about, if you want to know.
And there's so many things about your mom on there. Are they really about your mother?
Well,
was she a woman of faith?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Mama just stayed with me. I mean, all the years. I mean, I don't mean literally. She lived with me some. But I'm talking about in my heart and mind, Mama was always there. And in 1960, when I was in Nashville, not working, a position came up. My Aunt Margaret worked at Chester's woman's store, department store downtown on Church Street, a very exclusive shop. And the man that owned it said, I know you don't have a job and you're having a hard time. There's a building that's coming open on Nolensville Road. Half of it's going to be groceries, Kroger's, and the other half's going to be mine. We're going to put sale clothes in there and seconds and things like that because their downtown store was perfect. And he said, would you like to run it? And I said, yeah. Well, I went out there, and I was there months, and all of a sudden one day, it hit me to write these mother poems. And I wrote them on paper brown bags, and they were all about mamas. My mama, other mamas that I met and I knew people had. And I thought, golly, I love these. And I kept them. And later in I can't remember if I recorded some of them then, or I think it was, went in and recorded some of them then. And then later in 65, I did another version of other things, which is 2 CDs in one pack. And a friend of mine who was married to Dolly Parton's producer, he was good friends and she was a good friend of mine. And she took them, she said, you got to do those. She heard about them. And she said, you got to record these. And she went to the Tennessee Arts Commission to get a grant. Now, normally you had to fill papers out and all that and wait and all that. And they knew me there because I had been traveling. This is when I moved back this second time because I traveled for them doing poetry and in schools and things. And she said, I want to play you some of this. And they said, this is Maggie. And they said, oh, Maggie, yeah. And they said, we want to apply for a grant. We want to put these out on CDs. And he listened. He said, you don't have to apply. He pulled out a checkbook and wrote a check right then.
I'll read what Dolly Parton wrote. She says, what could be more precious than God, country, and family? Maybe Maggie Vaughn. Maggie has managed to put all of those elements into these great narrations. She then goes on to say that she too had a mother of many colors.
Is that you, Mama? Is that you, Mama? Mama, is that
just put a hand to my brow. And today when I couldn't work things out, was that you that showed me how? Is that you, Mama, that just turned on the porch light? You always had one on to keep me safe at night. Mama, was that you by the stove cooking beans and cornbread? And was that you during the night standing watch beside my bed? Is that you, Mama, that knocked that old bumblebee away? And you that called me into supper when I came in today? I know I felt you kiss my knee when I bumped it on the chair. And Mama, when I knelt to pray, was that you listening there? Is that you, Mama, oh, is that you? Did God let you come home to me? Or maybe you never left, I was just too blind to see. Or was it I felt so bad today and you knew I needed you, and God let you visit for just a day or two? Well, Mama, I'm okay now. You tell the Lord I said hi. Mama, is that you that just kissed me bye?
Melissa Manchester wrote about that collection. She said, Maggie Vaughn, sweet musings sweetly underscore the sights and shrugs of life. We are all indebted to her for capturing these delicate moments. That was Melissa Manchester.
Yeah. Well, Melissa, this Steve Buckingham, who was married to my friend Andy, produced Melissa and Dolly. And Melissa would come here a lot from L.A., and I knew her really well. And we cut up a lot, and I tried to get her to record Born to Lose. And she said, if you'll sing it and send it to me, I'll cut it. And I never got to do it. I still wish she'd do that. I just think that song would be great for her. But, and Dolly, I knew, gosh, back when she was on Porter Wagoner, I knew them all. And so they gave me blurbs for the back.
Well, that was nice. That's quite
yeah.
true. 1995, you're made Poet Laureate
Laureate of Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Still there, yeah.
And you still are. Tell me about that honor.
They're supposed to, we were going to, I'd let them know I'd been at about 25 years. And I said, look, it's time to get another one. There's only been one before me. That was Pet Gunn. And he had it till he died. But they renewed mine every 5 years. Because I said, you don't need to give me that to life. And we were going to get one before COVID hit. They asked me for names to put in, and they were going to put me on the committee, and COVID hit. They were giving me a big going-away party here at the banquet hall in Bell Buckle. And when COVID hit, you just couldn't get together, all that many people. And they still going to do something, but they haven't done it yet. So
well, tell me, you've written 4 inaugural poems for 4 different governors?
Yeah, 4 or 5. I can't remember.
Yeah, and you've written you wrote the...
My first one was for Don Sundquist. He used me a lot. Man, and that was on the time that we had our bicentennial. And I laugh because my bicentennial poem in 1995 was entitled Who We Are. Or titled, I shouldn't say entitled, was titled Who We Are. Now, you hear it on TV every day, everybody's saying, that's who we are. Not that they stole it from me, because it was a long time ago, through the years used, but now it's used all the time.
It resonated.
Yeah. It's
a beautiful poem.
Well, hundreds and hundreds showed up. Al Gore was there. He was vice president at the time. And dignitaries when they did the official ceremony, and I read it. And I talked about the different people, and I mentioned the mountain people. And honey, there were people way in the back who, couldn't get up front because it was so crowded. They stood when I said that. Different people cheered when I say something about the...
Well, I want to encourage the listeners of this podcast to look that up. You can find it on Google. I did. It's magnificent.
It's called Who We Are.
Who We Are. And so, that being said, you have the gift. Your friend KB Valentine, right?
KB.
And she said that her poems. What did tell us about
Well,
that?
every time she puts out a new book, she comes to see me, and she comes in between times too. But she handed me one of her books, and there was a line there, and the last word that she had room for to put on that line, she brought down in one line. And I said, KB, why did you not just put that word up there and you brought that one word down? And she looked at me and she smiled and she says, Maggie, I write for the eye, you write for the ear. I'd give anything if I could write for the ear. But you see, it's country music that gave me the ear.
Thank you for listening to Part 1 of our interview with Tennessee poet and author, Margaret Britton Vaughn. Part 2 is also now available on this streaming platform. We hope you'll subscribe to the Pod 615 for future episodes of your national music, dine, shop, arts, and entertainment podcast. And as always, be sure to buy and shop local as much as you can. Thank you again for your support and for listening in.